If you just got an Insta360 X5 or an X4 and you're wondering how to use it or what the best settings are for it, then stay tuned for this video because I'm about to deep dive into both of these cameras. They are pretty identical in terms of their layout and their settings and how you use them. So I'm going to go over both cameras and I will point out any differences. So if you want to know more about how to get the most out of these cameras, then watch the rest of this video because I do think that it's worth tweaking a lot of the settings to get the best image quality. I'll start with a quick walkthrough so that you can get up and running with it quickly, but I'll also dive into some of the key settings that I think you should change in order to get the most out of this camera in terms of image quality and audio quality. So let's get started. So for either the X5 or the X4, the very first step is to make sure that it's charged. You can go to the little area here to find the USB-C connector. It is in a different place on the X5 versus the X4, but just make sure that you've plugged it in and gotten some battery. And then the next thing is to remove the battery and insert the micro SD card. It's a little micro SD card. Insta360 actually does make their own, and this is a 256 gig card. I do recommend using the biggest size you can get your hands on, especially if you're going to be shooting in 8K. But there's where you insert the little memory card, and then you reinsert the battery. Now the batteries for the X5 and the X4, they look very, very similar, but they are not interchangeable. So just something to be aware of if you do happen to have both cameras. Next, you're going to want to connect the camera to the Insta360 phone app. So make sure that the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on your phone is on, and also that it's on the camera, and just connect it to the app. You will have to activate the camera this way and also probably install a firmware update. So that's why you want to have a decently full battery. But make sure that you do both of those before you use the camera. Next, go ahead and power on both cameras by tapping on the power buttons on the sides. That will turn the cameras on. Now we're going to go over the basic navigation. I will go over all of these sections later on in the video, but to start off with, if you swipe down, that's going to show you a bunch of the general settings. Now the layout is a little different on the X5 versus the X4, but all of your settings are here. Swipe up to go back to the main shooting area. So next, if you swipe right, that's going to show you a preview of any of the footage that you've filmed on the camera if you have the memory card inserted. Next, you can swipe left to access the shooting parameters. So you can change things like the color profile, the exposure, the white balance. Again, I'll go over all of these later on in the video, but this is just basic. You can also go from auto to manual mode. Now back in this main shooting area, if you're shooting in 360 video mode, you can tap and kind of drag your finger around, and that can help you reframe. So you can see, all the various angles that you're capturing when you're shooting in 360 mode. And this is by far my favorite feature on 360 cameras is the fact that you can plant the camera somewhere, but you can capture all these different angles. Now down in the lower left is an icon, and so this is how you go through the various shooting modes on the camera. Again, these are largely the same on both the X5 and the X4, but there are a couple of differences. I will highlight those later on. But the main mode that I shoot on is video mode. Now within video mode, this is also where you can choose 360 mode or single lens mode. Single lens mode is like shooting a flat non-360 video, so kind of like if you're using an action camera, you can do that with this camera too. And if you are in single lens mode, here are some of the commands here. So you can flip. So this is the front-facing camera, which is now looking at my desk, or you can flip it this way to show the other side, which is the lens here. And it is looking at the camera that is filming this camera. Another new feature on the X5 that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is the addition of 2 new digital lenses. So on the narrow side, you can now do linear, which is a more punched-in version of de-warp. And this one makes sure that, everything, most of your lines are going to be vertical. whereas dewarp wasn't quite like that. It was better than ultra or action mode, but yeah, linear is the best one if you want the most natural looking field of view. And X5 also adds Mega on the far end, so that is its widest field of view, but it also, again, somehow keeps most of the vertical lines purely vertical. So I've been using both linear and Mega the most. I don't really use these lenses in the middle so much anymore. Next, we're going to swipe down and go into the general settings. So one of the first things I do whenever I get any new camera is turn off the prompt sounds because I just find them a little annoying. So you want to tap on the sound icon. So you've got adaptive high, medium, low, or mute. I put this on mute, but if you do want to hear the prompt sounds, which can be really helpful if you're going to be shooting, from further away and you want to verify that your camera is recording, that's when that might be useful. But I personally like to have it turned off. You can also control screen brightness by tapping on the little sun icon. And, this can be really helpful when you're shooting indoors. Maybe the camera is a little too bright for you. When you're outdoors, you might want to punch it up. So that's a setting that I often toggle. I also like to turn off the indicator light. So there's the indicator light on the X5. On the X4, you want to swipe over one. But there's on, off. I find it a little distracting when I'm shooting, but if you are placing the camera further away and you want to know what mode the camera is on, I think it turns red when it's filming, and that's when you might want to have the indicator light on. Now within these menus, there's also gesture controls and voice controls. I do like how the X5 kind of calls these out, because on the X4, you kind of just have to look at the icon and know what they mean. But gesture controls, when you have them turned on, you can use several gestures to control the camera. Like you can do the peace sign to start and stop recording, or you can do the peace sign to snap a photo. So again, that can be really useful if you're planting your camera further away. There's also voice control. So if you turn that on, it'll tell you, you can select your language. There's really only 3 to choose from here. But there are some voice commands you can use, again, to control the camera from afar without having to have a physical remote. There's also timed capture, which again, a little more intuitive on the X5. But if you turn that on, you can choose a certain time to make the camera start recording. So if you want to plan it outside and you want it to start, filming the stars, or you want it to film sunrise, or you don't want to actually be out there to start the camera, that's when you might want to use time capture. You can set the start time, duration, the frequency, the shooting mode, and other parameters. You can also turn on the AI Highlight Assistant. You can see that the X5 offers you a few more settings compared to the X4, but when AI Assistant is on, it's nice because it'll analyze the video that you filmed, and it'll pick out, some key highlights and try to make a little highlights reel for you. I generally like this if I'm going to be shooting a really long video, and I want to be able to get a little reel that I can quickly share on social. But again, it does drain your battery a bit more, so I have that off if I'm not going to be shooting in that style. There's also the PreCapture mode, which lets you shoot between 30 or 45 seconds on the X5 or 10 to 40 seconds of video before you press the shutter button on the X4. And so this can be really helpful if you're going to be shooting something where you don't know when the action is going to come. But again, this does also drain your battery more, so I don't use this unless I'm shooting a specific moment when I know that I need that PreCapture recording. But one setting I always have enabled on any of my action cameras or 360 cameras is Quick Capture. So when it's enabled, this lets you press the shutter button when the camera is off, and it'll automatically wake up and start recording. So here's where you can customize, if it's on or off, and also what shooting mode you're going to start shooting in. So this is really helpful for quick on-the-go shooting, and I always have it enabled on my cameras. Now, brand new on the X5 is a new setting called Twist to Shoot, where you can twist the selfie stick back and forth to start and stop recording. I think this is really neat, especially when used in conjunction with a gesture or voice control, because it's just an alternate way to use the camera without having to attach a remote. There's also the new endurance mode, which I might use if I'm super low on battery and I need to get as much shooting as I can, albeit with limited settings. Now within both of the cameras, we can also add a Bluetooth device. On the X4, it's really not that intuitive. You have to tap on this little earbuds or AirBuds logo, and then it'll start searching for, supposedly headphones, but honestly, this also works for pairing a Bluetooth remote as well, which is why I say this is not an intuitive process. But on the X5, it's now just called Bluetooth. And so if you tap on that, here's where you can specify if you're connecting a remote or a headset or a microphone. Another nice new feature on the X5 is that it now shows audio levels when an external microphone is connected. Next are audio setting adjustments. So here it is on the X4, on the X5. So the X5 again does have a few extra settings in here if you're using the built-in microphone. I do really like that the X5 does, specify whether you have a microphone connected here or if you're using the built-in mic, because on the X4, it really doesn't. It just shows you the built-in mic audio setting options. But those audio setting options, again, are fairly similar, but there's a couple of new ones on the X5. So you can have, auto wind reduction. You can do weak or strong. You can do voice enhancement, or you can do stereo. And also there's 360 audio. Versus on the X4, you have slightly more limited controls here in terms of the built-in audio settings. This is an audio test with the Insta360 X5. We're using the built-in microphone and it is set to auto wind reduction weak. So this is what it sounds like. With the camera about an arm's length away, and we are shooting in single lens mode. Now we are in auto wind reduction strong, still shooting on the Insta360 X5 using the single lens mode. The camera is about an arm's length away, and this is what it sounds like using that built-in microphone on the camera. Now we've got voice enhancement mode enabled on the Insta360 X5 just as some cars are driving by, so a really good time to be testing this audio setting out. Still using that built-in microphone on the camera. Camera is an arm's length away. Now the audio is set to stereo, still using the built-in mics on the Insta360 X5. Camera is an arm's length away, and this is what it sounds like. So we are shooting in 360 mode. The camera does say that if you have this setting on and you're not shooting in 360 mode, it defaults to auto wind reduction noise setting or audio setting. So here's what it sounds like with plenty of noise around me in terms of cars driving by. Testing out audio on the Insta360 X4. This is the auto wind reduction setting on the camera using the built-in microphone. Camera is an arm's length away, and this is what it sounds like. Now we've got active wind reduction on the camera just as a plane is flying by overhead. Quite loud actually. And a bit of a breeze coming through, so here's what it sounds like. Hopefully you're still able to hear me well, but yeah, that's why we're testing this mode out. Now shooting in stereo mode using the built-in mics on the Insta360 X4, still using the single lens mode, and camera is an arm's length away. We've got a little bit of a breeze coming through as well as some cars. So here is what it sounds like. Now we're testing out direction focus on the Insta360 X4, still using that built-in microphone. So this is what it sounds like. I will also go ahead and flip the camera around. Right now I'm standing behind it, so I'm looking at that big LCD display. And now I'm standing on the other side of the camera, speaking into it. So here is what it sounds like, still with that directional focus audio setting on the camera. Now before we dive into presets and video and photo modes, there's an extra gear icon in here. You can tap to unlock a few more settings. So SD card is where you can verify, how much of your card has been used. In my case, I'm coming up on in the red here, but you can also format it. So I don't want to format my data right now, but that would erase everything that is on your card. New on the X5 is Timecode, which is very specific. You do have to have a timecode generator in order to use this, and it's geared toward professionals. So if you don't know what it is, then don't worry about it. But if you do know what it is, it's great to have that on the X5. But what I'm most interested in here are image settings. So here's where you can choose your video encoding. I choose H.265. You can also do H.264. You can also choose your video bitrate. So I do find that high is better for the best image quality, although it does make your file sizes a bit bigger. Also, video sharpness. This is also very key. I typically have it on low sharpness so I can adjust the sharpness in post-production because you can do that yourself. But you can also have it on medium if you don't want to add sharpness in post-production. I would just avoid having it on high personally because I find high sharpness to be a little too much. And while you can add sharpness in post, you cannot take away sharpness. So better to have too little than too much. You can also choose anti-flicker here. So I leave this on auto, but if you do notice any banding or flickering LED lights in your videos, you might want to manually choose this to 50 Hz or 60 Hz. Finally, out here we also have Customize Button. So this lets you customize the quick button on the side and also the menu button down here. I like to customize the quick button to be switched to single lens or 360 lens, but you can also choose another function here. You can also customize the menu button. For me personally, I leave it on switch shooting modes. Next, let's get into presets, which I think are way more intuitively labeled on the X5. We have a clear preset thing here versus here is just the icon. But they both look the same after you click into them. I'll go over my presets here, but you may want to watch the rest of the video modes and image settings sections first, in case I go over anything here that might be a little confusing. So you have some in here by default, but again, I've gone ahead and I've customized the X5 and not the X4. Unfortunately, even though you can add your own custom preset, you can't change the name, so that's kind of a bummer. But you can add your own preset, which is what I did here. So my custom presets, I added two here. One is running and the other is customize, which is my vlogging setting. And if you want to see those settings or customize them, there's a little pencil icon down here. So I make both of these presets single lens shooting modes. First one, the running one, is MeMode, and the other is a normal single lens shooting mode. I leave the shooting parameters for both presets at 4K 30, 16:9 ratio. And I also leave all of the image parameters on default, except for the color profile. I change it to flat in both scenarios. I'll explain all of these settings later on in the video. The third preset I have in here is the default one, and that's the 360 video preset, which is called Outdoors. I leave that on 360 video, 8K 30, and auto. Although I will actually, right now, change that color profile to flat. So from here, let's swipe up, and we're going to go back to this main area here. Now, depending on the mode that you're in, if you're in any of the video modes like video, PureVideo, Instaframe, Timelapse, TimeShift, bullet time, or loop recording, then you can access some of your key settings in this little image settings area here, like your video encoding, your bitrate, your sharpness, or anti-flicker. But you have even more settings if you also swipe left. So first of all, you can choose between auto and manual. If you press manual, then you'll notice that you'll see some things here like the shutter speed, the ISO, the EV, the white balance. If you don't know what any of these mean, then you probably shouldn't be shooting in manual. I mean, I know what they mean and I don't even use manual. I just prefer to be in auto pretty much 100% of the time. So first of all, we have the picture profile. So on both cameras, you have three to choose from. You've got standard, vivid, and flat. I like to be either standard if I don't want to do any post-processing, or flat if I want lower saturation and just more flexibility for post-processing. Lately, I've been preferring flat, especially if my face is in the shot, because I just find it to be a little bit more flattering, but this is definitely a personal preference. New on the X5 is also the ability to shoot in iLog. The only catch is that you do have to be shooting in HDR mode. So, sorry, that was a little fast. You can tap, then tap down here the resolution, and then here is where you would turn HDR on or off. And just notice that HDR is only available if you're shooting in 5.7K and below, so you cannot shoot in 8K. But you can turn HDR on, and then now if you go back to this menu, you can choose to have log or iLog turned on. And if you turn iLog on, you see that even compared to the flat color profile, which is right here, that log gets even more desaturated and less contrasty. So if you want to color grade your shots, like you pretty much have to if you're going to shoot in log, but that's why you would want to shoot in log. Now, one other restriction though, if you are shooting in log, is that it's only available if you're shooting in 360 mode. If you go to single lens mode, you see that the log function isn't even available here. So if you want to shoot in log, it has to be done in 360 mode with HDR turned on. Log is not available on the X4, but it was available on the X3, so not sure why they did that. But next, the menu is now the same for both cameras. We can go to EV, or exposure value. This basically lets you control the brightness. So you see as I'm going negative that the exposure is becoming darker. And as I increase the exposure, my shot is becoming even brighter. So typically I'll leave this on 0, or sometimes I might leave it on, .-3 or 0.03. So just a really slight negative exposure, because I do find that these compact cameras, they do tend to slightly overexpose your image. And if you overexpose, it's really hard to correct it in post versus underexpose, so it is better to have your EV be slightly lower. Next up, these icons get a little mixed up between the two cameras. They're still here, but they're just in a different order. But on the X5, we have white balance. White balance is all the way down here. And you can have this on auto or manual. I personally like to just leave this on auto because I'm usually shooting in log or flat anyway. Next, we have a low light stabilization setting. So on the X4, it's this little symbol here, low light stabilization. But on the X5, it's called jitter blur reduction. But they both basically do the same thing. It just improves the motion blur and the stability when you're shooting in low light. I personally did not see a huge difference when I had this turned on, but maybe that's the taste. And finally, on both cameras, on the very end here, we have something called balanced exposure, which automatically adjusts exposure for any environment. I just leave this on auto, and I feel like it does a pretty good job. Now let's tap, and then swipe up. And here's where you're going to see your resolution and your frame rate settings if you're shooting in video mode. So you can see that on both cameras you can shoot in up to 8K 30 frames per second, or as low as 4K. This is also where you can shoot in slow motion. You just have to change your frame rate in order to get to slow motion mode. So on the X4 you can shoot in up to 4K 100 frames per second, slow motion, or on the X5 you can do 4K 120 or 4K 100. If you shoot in 4K 60 or below, this is going to be your normal speed video. Now on the X5, notice that here's where you would choose HDR. You can turn HDR off or on. And again, you do have to be in 5.7K or below to have HDR on. But on the X4, if you want to shoot in HDR, you want to actually go to active HDR mode. So there's a video mode, then there's an HDR mode. So getting to HDR is a little different on both of these cameras. If you installed the latest July 2025 firmware update, you'll also notice the new adaptive tone mode here. It differs from HDR in that it focuses on capturing a full range of image data first, and then it optimizes brightness, contrast, and color during the editing phase in the Insta360 phone app or the Studio desktop computer app. This does mean that it can increase your export times, and it also uses more battery life, and it also uses more camera battery power while also increasing camera heat. Currently, adaptive tone mode only works when shooting in 360 video mode in 8K 30 or 5.7K with HDR turned on, but it also works when shooting in PureVideo 360 mode. PureVideo mode used to only be available when shooting in 360 video, but after the July 2025 firmware update, you can now use PureVideo mode when shooting in single lens mode as well. But as for which resolution I choose to shoot in, if I'm doing non-HDR video and I'm shooting in 360, I'm going to shoot in 8K because my final video that I'm going to be exporting is going to be cropped. It's not going to be a 360 video. So in that case, I want to make sure that I have the highest resolution possible. But one thing to note is that Insta actually recommends shooting in 5.7K if you're going to be shooting in low light. So this is really key, especially for the X4 because it does not have a low light shooting mode. So if you want to be doing low light shooting, definitely be shooting in 5.7K 360 video. Or on the X5 for low light, you can actually go into PureVideo mode. This is a setting that we also have on the Ace Pro, which is Insta's GoPro-like action camera. Again, you can shoot in 8K, but they actually recommend shooting in 5.7K. And that's what you would shoot in to get really low light video. And the nice thing on the X5 is that when you are in regular video mode and it detects that you're shooting in a lower environment, it actually has this little icon that pops up here that tells you that it's detecting low light, and it recommends, changing over to pure video mode. You can do that just by tapping on that icon if it pops up. But back to the video resolutions, if I'm shooting in non-360 video, if I'm going to be shooting in single lens mode, then we have some restrictions here in terms of the resolutions that we can choose from. Notice that we can only go up to 4K 60 frames per second. We can't do 8K or even 5K in this mode. So I'm usually down at 4K 30 if I'm shooting in single lens mode. But within single lens mode, we can choose not only the resolution, but we can also choose the ratio. So you can choose 16:9, which would be a horizontal video, or you can do 9:16, or a vertical video. Now let's go over all of the modes in these cameras by tapping on the icon down here. So notice that in many cases you can choose between 360 and single lens, and some of your options might go away or appear depending on which of these that you choose. But if you do have single lens mode enabled, you are able to now select FreeFrame video. This is when the camera shoots in a wider field of view, and so you can, in post-production, you can go back and you can choose to crop that video into a vertical or a horizontal shot. Single lens mode also opens up MeMode, which lets you record a wide-angle video with the invisible selfie stick, and it does automatic reframing, so you won't have to reframe that video in post-production, which is definitely something I don't like about shooting 360 videos. And the rest of these video options let you choose between 360 mode and single lens mode. But when shooting in 360 mode, something that is new on the X5 is the new Instaframe option. When shooting in Instaframe, you can record both an auto-framed flat non-360 video and a 360 video at the same time. So this way you can easily share the flat video without having to fiddle with editing. And then you can save the 360 video to edit later. This takes a lot of pressure out of deciding which video mode to shoot in when you're out in the field. So the Instaframe menu looks pretty wild when you first have a look at it. You can do, selfie view, which is where everything is kind of automated, and I definitely would recommend that if you're just getting started with it. But you can also go into the custom view. And so when you're in custom view, this allows you to customize a lot of what you're seeing in here. The other video modes in here are pretty straightforward. You've got Timelapse, which you can do in 360 or in flat. You can choose your resolution. You can shoot in up to 11K for Timelapse, which is pretty insane. But and you can also choose your intervals in here too for your Timelapse. You can do TimeShift as well. You can do this in 360 or in single lens mode. TimeShift, it's really fun. It's like a walking or moving time lapse. So if you're going to be doing any kind of movement and holding the camera, that's when you would want to choose TimeShift instead of time lapse. But it functions very similarly, where you have to choose your resolution, your frame rate, and also the speed. You can also choose bullet time. For this one, you do need a special accessory that lets you kind of swing the camera around, kind of like a lasso if you're like a bull rider. But it can make a really nice little effect. There's not a lot you can choose in terms of your settings here. You're shooting at 5K or 3K, 120 frames per second, or 240 frames per second. You also have loop recording. So this is ideal for if you want to use this camera kind of like a dash cam. That's when I would choose loop recording. Here's where you can choose the settings. You would want to really customize that loop duration here. Next, we've got road mode, which is new on the X5. But this is where you can allocate a portion of the SD card space for road mode recording. Then we have Starlapse. Again, kind of like a time lapse, but you would just choose to do this if you're going to be shooting at night. You can see that already the camera is trying to make this really, really dark environment look really bright. So it does star lapses. You can choose between photo or video. But yeah, this is really fun if you're going to be setting the camera up at night. This is probably when you'd want to also use the scheduled recording feature. And then we get into some photo modes here. So we've got burst. This is when the camera will shoot a bunch of photos in a row. So really good if you want to plant the camera, maybe take some selfies or some group shots. So you can set the timer here as well as the resolution. Well, the resolution is really just 18 megapixels. But you can also choose, you know, the burst. How many photos is it going to take at what interval? We've also got interval shooting itself. Again, we can set the resolution. So now we can choose between 72 megapixels and 18 megapixels. And really important to also select your duration. So infinite, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you know, various durations here. And your intervals. So how often is the camera going to take a photo? And this is new in the X5. So the X4, for photo, it has HDR photo and regular photo. And the X5, it kind of blends everything into one setting here. So if we choose photo mode, you can choose 72 megapixels or 18 megapixels. And within the X5, you can specify HDR photo on or off or auto EB, versus on the X4, you would want to go over into HDR photo mode if you want to shoot HDR. But within the photo modes, you can again swipe left and you're able to have some of these parameters here to adjust. Now these do differ between the cameras. So this is the X5 here. You can choose your exposure, so your brightness, and also your white balance, auto or manual settings. And here on the X4, it gives you slightly more settings. So you can choose pure shot, you can choose this compressed footage, or you can choose pure shot plus raw. So this is the output, the photo output basically. You also have the exposure, you have the white balance, and you also have the balanced exposure setting. For some reason, those are all missing on the X5. The X5, the format actually is right here. So this is where you would choose pure shot or pure shot plus raw. So slightly different layout here of the settings. But really, that's it. Those are all of the settings here. I don't use all of them. I mainly stick to a video, pure shot, and sometimes the time lapse and the time shift. But those are the main settings that I personally use on this camera. So hopefully you found this walkthrough helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if there are other products that you'd like a similar settings guide to. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.